Before Ray Hadley joins us, here's the latest rain radar that's happening right now over Sydney, where the rain is thumping down right now. I can tell you it has been particularly heavy. Places like Hornsby, Pymble, Penrith, all the way up into the Blue Mountains. There's another run of it on the south coast as well. All of that on top of what we've already been dealing with on the mid and far north coast. Ray Hadley is the legendary Hall of Fame broadcaster with Radio 2GB, 4BC, and I'm pleased to say has a chat to us now. Great man, that rain, every time we hear it, we know it's going to be a big story in the morning.
You can add the Hills District to it, mate, because it's pouring in the Hills District at the moment. There have been evacuations at Rossmore, and of course people were forewarned around the Georges River, Chipping Norton, Moorebank, Milperra and the like to also vacate. But look, our thoughts are with those people in Lismore, Ballina, southeastern Queensland, Logan particularly, which is a mess, and now it's hammering down the coast, and there'll be an impact on the south coast of New South Wales as well, where it's been really raining heavily most of the evening. So our thoughts are with them. And the strange thing is, we haven't seen the sun for about 5 or 6 days. If we didn't have a coal-fired power station, we might be a bit of strife with one of those batteries or one of those solar farms that needs that sun and the wind to get the wind farms going as well. So we just might have to rethink that for a little bit longer till we find something a bit more reliable than what they're talking about.
Excellent point. Yet another reason you should talk to Matt Kean on the radio, because he, of course, as Treasurer, inherits what Gladys Berejiklian gave Dominic Perrottet as Treasurer, which is a $700 million thing called Resilience New South Wales. Its boss is Shane Fitzsimmons, of course, the bloke who used to run the Rural Fire Service, and you've been nailing this for days. What the hell does this thing do, and where the hell are they?
Well, no one knows. It's $790 million a year budget. Now, it was a thought bubble from Gladys before she farewelled Parliament in 2019. And Perrottet was the Treasurer. He was opposed to it. None of the ministers knew about it. And I think it was announced on a Monday morning, this Resilience Commission. And everyone thought, well, yeah, I see what they're doing. He's been a pretty good RFS commissioner. They're going to use him to oversee problems, whether it's bushfires, floods, as we're examining now. In the same way that governments in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, they get crisis management, they'll get a former senior police officer, former senior army officer in to oversee the recovery of it. So we thought, oh, that's what it's all about. But it's not about that. It's a de facto SES, it's a de facto RFS, and it needs to be dismantled. I'm afraid it might feel good to call yourself the Resilience Commissioner. He's not a bad bloke, Shane. I'm sure, you know, he was a bit surprised by the offer to do the job as well as most people were, including ministers of the Crown. But they do bugger all. They don't do anything. I mean, he gets there, he stands at the back of the media conference nodding like that little dog we used to have on the shelf at the back of our cars in years gone by. But apart from that, they don't. It's only the last 3 months they've actually got staff. But it's $790 million a year it's costing the New South Wales taxpayers. Now, if Perrottet's fair income, given that he thought it was a shocking idea when he was Treasurer, he's now the Trump. He's the boss. Dominic, just shelve it, mate. Say, look, Shane, what we'll do, we'll put you on a retainer, you're on the contract. When we need you, we'll call you and you can be the man in charge of crises. But in the meantime, we don't need a Resilience Commissioner nor a commission. See you later. Well, so we're really in trouble, which we are at the moment, obviously.
Now, as always, I listen to the program with notes, taking, you know, what the big issues are. And you nailed something today where you talked about one of the problems that's going to be there for Lismore, that put simply, you need a certified electrician to declare that the power to your business or your home is going to be safe enough before power can even be returned to the street, let alone the suburb, let alone the city. How long is that going to take?
Well, I predicated this on talking to a baker, whose name, by the way, is Steve Butcher the baker, in Lismore. He's got a couple of shops. So I got photos tonight of his shops, which are just completely destroyed. You know, it was up to the rafters. So they'll start cleaning up probably, by Friday, if they don't get any more rain, or Monday. So all these baking equipment's destroyed. And this is the same for every business and every home in Lismore which is inundated. So before they can turn on the power, they need to get a licensed electrical contractor, which would be in short supply in the northern region at the moment. And then it may have to be rewired, the entire premises, because it's all been soaked wet. They rewire it, and then the local electricity company, whoever governs that area, says, oh, we can't switch everyone back on until you're all being checked. He doesn't think he'll be operational with other businesses that rely on power to do business, and they all do, for another 4 to 5 weeks. Now, he's got a stack of people relying upon him to pay their wages to bake bread, pies, pasties, sausage rolls and cakes and all the rest of it. And, you know, whether they're doing that or whether they're doing other jobs or whether they're, you know, a general store or an electrical store or whatever they might be doing, they need power to operate and they won't get it. So, I mean, instead of paying the Resilience Commissioner and the Commission $790 million, what about Dominic fork out some money to these businesses and say, right, we'll get, you know, a large fleet of trucks up there with electrical contractors to get the power back on as quickly as we can. That's what they need at the moment. Once the clean-up is done, and the clean-up hopefully will be finished in the next couple of weeks, well, they need then the power to be on, and they need electrical contractors to install new power points, new cabling, and get back in business, because that's what they're confronting at the moment in Lismore.
Bloody oath. Now, I know this is a bit of a late one, and we mentioned at the start of the show, Sally McManus, right? The ACTU boss, this is her contribution to the flood situation when she says here, I know there must be a really obvious answer to this, but a question for the hydrologists. When Warragamba Dam is near capacity, why doesn't Sydney Water suspend billing and ask people to all turn their taps on to take it down a bit before more rain comes?
Well, I heard the discussion earlier with your guests, and look, sometimes people who go on Twitter and tweet show forms of idiocy, and that's most unfortunate. Now, I noticed that you haven't done it for 6 years. I'm proud to say I've never done it. I'm talking about tweeting. I've never done it. And I thought, very interesting article today by Dennis Shanahan in the Australian newspaper, showing the vast volume of people are concerned about the involvement with social media, the vast volume of people. Now, I'd also say this. Too many people in the media, some in my industry, get terribly worried if there's a tweet, you know, saying terrible things about them. You're talking about a minuscule amount of people in the community who actually go to the trouble, firstly, to get on there and say terrible things to other people. I'd say to those people in the print media, the electronic media like me, do yourself a favour. Don't take one bit of notice of what's tweeted, whether it's by Sally McManus or anyone else, because it comes from a vacuum. And the vacuum is usually between the people's ears that are tweeting. And look, I know it's a resource that some people use in the media to find out what's going on and all the rest of it. But when you start commenting and you get half-witted comments, as we've seen from the ACTU boss, I mean, it just shows what complete lack of regard we should have for Twitter. I mean, I'm proud to say I'll finish my media career having never tweeted. I never started. I won't ever start. I think it's just an absolute nonsense. I've got an Instagram profile with 4 friends, my children. And when my grandchildren get old enough, I'll be able to see their photos as well. That's the only thing I use it for. The only thing I use it for. And I'm really worried, you know, as I get towards the end of my career, that people that follow me will be, you know, bamboozled and corralled into making decisions, whether they're station managers or, you know, news directors or print media editors, into reacting to Twitter, because it's a waste of time. The vast majority of people get their news in traditional media, and that will survive traditional media with digital platforms and various other platforms. But for God's sake, get off Twitter.
Yeah, I'm with you. Last one here. I mentioned him before, but what about Matt Kean having no idea what he's talking about when Mark Latham bowled one at him about just how many people will actually be helped by any sort of New South Wales government scheme about the inevitable blowing up of more power stations? Here's what happened in an upper house inquiry.
Could I just ask about the jobs plan at Eraring? What's the Treasury advice on how many of the 500 workers will access any of the jobs that you announced in your press release on the 19th of February?
How many workers will access it? Well, we believe that there'll be, I mean, in broad terms, Mr Latham, we believe
in detailed terms, because these are the livelihoods of 500 workers and their families in Lake Macquarie. I'll get to the details.
So as a result of our package, we believe we'll create 3,700 jobs.
He's clueless.
Mark always asks questions you know the answer to, and unfortunately Matt didn't know. But there was a better part, apart from him not knowing where these workers from Eraring are going to go. He talked about Angus Taylor, who spoke on my program about not knowing anything about what was happening with that coal-fired power station. And he said in that upper housing hearing that the federal minister, his counterpart, who's also a member of the LNP, by the way, didn't understand batteries. Now, I'm a complete imbecile when it comes to batteries, but I know that they sometimes get cars to go. I know that sometimes they are put in your torches. I know that they're in your phone and you can recharge them. And I'm sure that the federal minister responsible for such matters has a full understanding of batteries. And I'll tell Matt Kean this, mate, they run out. They run out. The battery you're talking about and the battery in South Australia would run Tomago for 8 minutes. The aluminium smelter north of you, 8 minutes. It's a facility that needs to go 24/7, 365 days a year, or guess what? We'll be buying the aluminium from China. Look, I don't know what Perrottet is going to do with this bloke. He's a liability. He may even cost the federal government the election in those Hunter Valley regions and other regions by the time we get to May. And Matt, for goodness sake, pull your head in, mate. They're looking for wood. Honest, please.
So good to talk to you, mate. I look forward to listening to you in the morning.
See you, mate. All the best. Good to talk.
See you. The great man, Ray Hadley, of course, the Hall of Fame broadcaster, and I'm pleased to say, on the radio each and every morning at 9 o'clock in Brisbane and in Sydney on 4BC and 2GB.